Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. We're getting pretty close to the end of Passion, as obvious by the fact that this song, Farewell Letter, is really the last time that Clara and Giorgio truly communicate back and forth with one another. I'd love to know if any listeners out there actually still communicate with somebody out there, a romantic partner, a friend, another family member of some kind, where you truly do communicate through letters. And I only ask this because I've just recently started doing this. Maybe I've been influenced by Passion far too much here this year, but there's a friend who I've known for close to 30 years now at this point. And we've decided to start sending actual physical letters in the mail to one another to kind of keep each other up to date. Rather than just sending a text, rather than just sending an email, we have decided, no, we're going to put pen to paper, or as is sometimes the case, typewriter, so I can actually typewrite it out and then send it off to him. I'd love to know from you if that's something that even interests you a tiny little bit, and whether or not you are actually trying to make that happen. In the real world right now, I have a friend who I have not seen in roughly 17 years, in person at least. We have communicated within that time frame, but he's visiting from Portland, Maine, so I have to go off and hike a hill apparently right now. So enjoy this week's episode, and we'll see you very soon.
Giorgio, Giorgio, I am writing to you, my angel. Though not long since you've been gone, with a most unhappy heart.
Charlotte LeMay, thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Yes. Hello, Kyle. It's good to be here. You actually read one of my emails in an earlier episode.
Sure did.
So I kind of felt like I was Clara. I'm not really on stage, but getting my letters read.
That's right. I know. Yeah. I should turn this entire podcast into an epistolatory podcast and just read letters and analyze it through that way. Because you bring it up, I would love just to jump into understanding your relationship with Passion in total. Like, when was the first time you came across it? Yeah,
I came across it. It would have been, there was some point at which I realized I liked Sondheim so much that I just went through all the ones I hadn't heard. And this was in that list. I think this one, you have to listen to it a couple times for it to really sink in. But once it sunk in, I think it really stuck with me. And so I think
the recurring joke I keep making here is that Passion in itself is very much like Fosca.
Yeah.
Which is like, you don't know you love it until you realize you love it.
Right. But yeah, so I do love it. And I guess I'm in my 20s. I'm like basically the same age as these characters. I'm having not exactly these life experiences, but it feels very emotionally resonant with a lot of things I go through. So this show actually, probably more than any other show, like if I'm in real distress, I will sit and listen to this whole thing.
Interesting. Okay.
And I actually find that the way it kind of draws out these difficult emotions is really speaks to me and is really helpful.
So you feel like the anguish and tortured pain that Giorgio goes through makes you feel better about yourself, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's all the characters. I think I see myself in Fosca, I see myself in Giorgio, and I see myself in Clara as well.
Yeah.
Right. So because Fosca has this experience of being rejected in a really intense way, and then Giorgio he's dealing with someone else's feelings that seem too intense. He doesn't know what to do, and he's also not sure how he himself feels. And then Clara is watching someone she loves kind of drift away from her, and and all these things are like, they're all going through their own kind of pain.
Yeah, to be like super simplistic about it, the more I've analyzed this show and the deeper I go into it, there is obviously the very intentional comparison of light versus dark. Clara meaning light in Italian, Fosca meaning dark in Italian. So like it's this idea of this idealized version of what a relationship / love can be in Clara. Then like, I'll say the realistic version of love. And then you have Giorgio, who basically his entire arc is this teenager version of like what he thinks love is, which is, just, having sex all the time. And then him realizing, like, oh, wait a second, there's actually more to it than that. There's actually these other feelings that come into it, and it doesn't make sense. And there is all these other things you have to live through. and him coming to terms with that idea.
I think there's also a lot. I think one thing you see, I watched this like last night to prepare, and one of the things that stood out to me that time was the way that there are moments when Fosca and Giorgio talk about the stars, or they talk about, I think when they're on the train, it's night, and because of course Fosca is always associated with night, but it's night and they look out and I forget what they see, but he's kind of experiencing the world that he didn't really notice. Right? Remember, I guess there's that greenhouse that he's always walking by, and she points it out. Yeah. He's like, I never noticed. I feel like Giorgio is a person who he's kind of not really, he's not being mindful. You know, he's not very aware of his life, and part of this experience of love for him, I think, is becoming more aware.
Talking about like noticing them talking about stars, him and Clara always talk about sunrises or sunsets, right. which is also interesting. So not that you have had to, but have you also ever watched like the original like Italian film that Sondheim based this off of, or read the novel at all?
I have not. I've purely only know the adaptation. Yeah. I'd be interested to.
Yeah. I mean, all the versions of this story, all of the all of the major points here are exactly the same. I wouldn't say that there's any like major differences. There's certain things that either like quickly go through or streamline a little bit in the adaptations, but it is actually very fascinating to see like how much is just like verbatim or the same between all three versions.
Yeah, that is always surprising because a lot of, I see this with, if you look at the Sweeney Todd play.
Yes.
Like a lot of that text is actually ends up in Sondheim's lyrics, and it kind of almost spoils the illusion a little bit when you realize how much he's just taking the text and reworking it. Obviously, he has a lot of craft, but it's not purely his brain. You know?
No, exactly.
Yeah, right.
I think that's the difference, is because it might not be coming whole cloth from him, but it's the way like, I can write the original music and set it to this, and how do I take these already made words and put them into lyric form. It's also why why I'm so curious. And again, to be ultimately fair, he very often will credit where he gets certain lines from, because he always had his collaborators, his book writers, write like monologues for him to base things off of, and he would like take certain lines or words and then put them into lyrics. So as he likes to say, he was a very lazy writer in many ways. When it works, it works.
One thing I really liked, I listened to your episode discussing the novel. Yeah. And it's one of the themes that you and your guest pulled out there was that in the novel, I think there's a bit more of a sense that Fosca is almost like a supernatural character.
Yeah.
He's almost like a vampire character. And I think that's very interesting. And I think that is kind of there in the show. I think something that's interesting is that it's almost like a magical story without having that as an explicit element. But Fosca does feel like a force of nature that's maybe beyond normal.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think really the stage show needs to like lean into like that supernatural aspect. Although having said that out loud, that would be a neat adaptation of this. A director who like really leans into that idea of Fosca being a supernatural being in that regard. But I appreciate the versions that I've seen or listened to, her just being like fully formed, like a character who's like, I know what I want, I'm going after it, is also an interesting like metaphorical examination of these themes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, any sort of supernatural story is ultimately a metaphorical examination of themes, right? And so this is like, we're still doing it in modern day. I appreciate that.
I need her to suck some blood. That is what I need in this story. The other question I've been asking certain people here this season too, any hot takes you have about this show in particular? Like, is there anything that you feel is either under-discussed, over-discussed, or anything that you wanted to bring up about the show in general?
So one thing I really like about this show is that I think if I were to describe this show to someone and I say, well, there's this young hot guy and he's having an affair with a hot lady, and then there's a lady that's not very hot that's into him, and he ultimately chooses her. If I tell you that's the basic plot structure, it can kind of seem like the show, you could imagine a version of the show that's very simplistic, where he's choosing between, physical attraction versus a long-term partnership and decides that the latter is more important or something.
Yeah, the emotional connection is more important than the physical.
And there's,
connection.
I mean, that's sort of what the show's about, but I think it's a lot more complicated. I think one of the things that I would point out is that at the end of the show, and we'll maybe talk about this in the song we're going to discuss, Clara offers to, after her child grows up, to leave her husband and be in a long-term relationship with Giorgio.
Yeah.
But he gives that up so that he can have a one-night stand with Bosca, right? Because he sleeps with her the one time and then that's it. Which just kind of complicates it, right? It's not a Madonna horror story,
No,
right?
I agree. I think it's a little bit more.
The question of like who is the it's not clear like who's the like virtuous woman and who's the not virtuous woman. Like that's how it's not. To me, I think it's not a sexist play, which if you just heard the plot description, it sort of runs the risk of being, and also that Fosca pursues Giorgio. They kind of reverse the gender roles. I think that's a very interesting aspect of it.
I think it's interesting, and like I said, like in many ways, it's interesting when this original story is written, and like. Of course, it is like an 85 to 90% an adaptation of the biography of the author. Like he lived through a lot of this and then he tweaks some things here and there to make it into a story. But what I always say is like, were this to have been written in the 90s, if this was an original story written in the 90s, like when this show debuts, I would tell you 1,000% they would have to have this be a battle between Clara and Fosca at some point. Like there would have to be that confrontation, which all of these stories end up having when you look through like the 80s and 90s, especially when it has these types of like man with two women type of stories. Like
there's always a woman from
Yes. Yeah.
Anyone can whistle.
Anyone can whistle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
There'd be some sort of confrontation between these two. And I kind of liked the fact that they never meet each other, that Giorgio is the one who bounces between them, even though they do show up on stage together, but they never actually meet each other. Yeah, and then
they fight and they scratch each other with their nails. Or exactly. It just all gets very reductive,
I know, exactly. So it's a much more, like you said, complicated and much more, I think, interesting examination of these things. Hey everyone, just Kyle breaking into the conversation to tell you about some of the people that help this show continue to go. If you would like to help support this show for absolutely free, you can give a rating and review on whatever app you listen to podcasts in. That's of course greatly appreciated. Putting It Together is an independent podcast, so if you'd like to help monetarily, which will only help to grow and make this show better, you can do so over at our Patreon page. Please do not donate if it impacts you negatively financially. Also need to give a huge thank you to the God That's Good tier from Patreon of Alex, Barry, Christopher, David, Jack, Luis, Michael, Mika, Robert, Stephen, and Witty. All right, let's get back to the show. What are we here to talk about today?
Well, we're talking about the farewell letter, or I guess my other hot take is that I kind of feel like this is an opera, even though Sondheim doesn't like opera. So
yeah, he doesn't like that
if it were an opera, it would be named after the first line of the song. So Giorgio, Giorgio, I'm writing to you.
I also like the fact that this is called Farewell Letter, except there is another letter that he reads at the very, very end of the show, but that's beside the point.
It's the other farewell letter.
Yeah, this is called Farewell Letter. Before we jump into that song, though, I think it bears some discussion of something that happens right before this, which very unhelpfully in the book, Look, I Made a Hat, it's just called Scene 13, which is this song that Clara sings, which is in the film version of the stage show and on some of the recordings, but is not on the original cast recording. Having said that, what did you want to say about like this section?
Oh yeah, so this is
what Clara sings.
Right. So at this point, he was intending to go on his 40-day sick leave to see Clara, but because Fosca followed him on the train, he has to take her back to the colonel's house, and then she writes to him again, and she tells him, "Oh, actually, my husband's going to be away for at least a day, maybe 2 or 3, and so this would be." She basically is offering him that this would be the first time that they could spend the night together.
Yeah, to put it plainly for maybe those people who don't know what we're talking about, this is what she says. She says, Giorgio, I didn't tell you in my letter something even better, a surprise here at home. In a week, my husband goes to Rome. It's the first time he's away. He'll be gone at least a day, maybe 2 or even 3. I can visit you at night. We'll be lighted by the moon, not a shuttered afternoon. Just think of having time that we can call our own, together and alone. Perhaps we'll take a drive into the country, and perhaps at last we'll share a sunrise. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Giorgio, I didn't tell you in my letter. Something even better, a surprise here at home. In a week, my husband goes to Rome. It's the first time he's away. He'll be gone at least a day, maybe 2 or even 3. I can visit you at night. We'll be lighted by the moon, not a shuttered afternoon. Just think of having time that we can call our own, together and alone. Perhaps we'll take a drive into the country, and perhaps at last we'll share a sunrise. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Clara!
Another tryst that she says that they could have.
Right. But the interesting thing here is that, first of all, watching this show, I think it's easy to forget that Giorgio and Clara have never spent the night together. They've had sex during the day. Whereas he did spend the night with Fosca in the I Wish I Could Forget You scene. And the other things she mentions, the lighted by the moon, that happened in the train scene with Fosca, taking a drive into the country. I guess they sort of do that in the garden sequence. So I just think it's interesting. These are just things he's done with Fosca already. And so kind of without realizing it, I think his relationship with Fosca, this is a moment where you kind of feel his relationship with Fosca is kind of deeper than his relationship with Clara, because these are all, this is old news to him, to Giorgio.
No, I think that's a great call out here. Yeah, mentioning all the things that he's actually already done with another woman. I think the other thing that, in my opinion, is very subtle about the Clara and Giorgio interactions throughout this show, while they always are stay fairly light and romantic-ish, you can see cracks if you really listen to what they're saying here. And especially for Clara, because it's always, I have this specific time that I can spend with you. She really does get to dictate how much and for how long that they spend time together.
Right, at least
she kind of has she has the power. She has the power in the relationship in many, many ways. I think Giorgio at this point is being confronted by the fact I am always going to be at the whim of when she is allowing me to have time with her, rather than just actually being in a relationship with someone, which again is the opposite of what Fosca is. It's I'm here with you. I don't care. Let's just do this.
Right.
I'm both feet in together forever, which for Fosca is 3 days, but still, there's.
I think that at least a day. I think when you hear it, it's it sounds so underwhelming. Right.
right.
A day, great.
And then, of course, it is Giorgio then writes back saying that Fosca needs him. If Clara would leave her husband, it would be a different matter, but she can't. So they are at an impasse, is how he phrases it. So that's kind of the lead up into this scene. I think there's a bit of a book scene here too. Do you recall exactly what is happening right before this song starts? Right before
this. Okay, so he goes to visit Clara. They talk, and he says that he's not going to stay the 40 days. He's going to only stay 4 days and then go back. And I think he doesn't quite understand why. We sort of understand he's already down bad for Fosca. But she says but Clara understands. She's like, it's that woman, isn't it? And so they have that discussion. He says, no. And then he goes back. He's in the colonel's house again. The news comes that he's been transferred out of the colonel's regiment, and so he'll be leaving. He won't see Fosca again. She cries out, "No, Giorgio, my love!" And this is in front of everyone, and so this is a major social gaffe, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he also gets a letter from Clara, which he hasn't read yet because he's getting scolded by the colonel, and there's a lot of drama. So then the colonel says, "Okay, I'll talk to you later." Goes to deal with Fosca. Then he's alone. Then he reads the letter from Clara.
This is probably very gauche, but to quote another musical that's not Sondheim, too many notes for my taste. This is my favorite question I've been asking everyone here, because he plays a role in this, the doctor kind of ordering him to take another post almost. What's your take on this doctor character?
The doctor,
this benevolent force that goes through the entirety of the show.
Well, not always benevolent. Yeah. It seems like he's the mastermind here. It does seem like, I think it's plausible that Giorgio was transferred originally. Like, I wouldn't put it past the doctor to have, there's this handsome young colonel that could be good for Fosca. We should bring him, or young captain, excuse me. I think that I read a book called I enjoyed this book, the Reinvention of the American Musical. Stephen Sondheim and the Reinvention of the American Musical.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
By Robert McLaughlin, and I liked his discussion of passion. And so he talks a lot about the doctor, and he points to this thing the doctor says that's like, when he's sending Giorgio to Fosca's bedside, the doctor says, "You have only to give her words. What are a few words when a life hangs in the balance?" And so the doctor's sort of take on love, I think, is that it's kind of just words you say. And there's no kind of deeper substance behind that. And then Robert McLaughlin connects that to postmodernism, which we don't have to talk about right now. But I think that actually Giorgio's relationship with Clara is kind of like this, where they have the words. They have the words that are supposed to mean that they're in love, but the substance is missing. And so when in their very first interaction, when she says that we ever met as a miracle, and he says, "No, inevitable." And she says, "Well, it was an inevitable miracle." That an inevitable miracle doesn't mean anything, right? Both those words sound romantic, but put them together and it's nonsense, right? So I think what the doctor kind of stands for is this idea of love as being not something deeper than just the words that you say, right? And so for him, he doesn't particularly care so much about people's feelings or anything like that. He says, well, and I guess in particular it's a cure. He views it as a medical cure for Fosca, and he seems like an ally when he's pulling Giorgio in, an ally of Fosca, I guess. But then he's just as willing, if he feels like Fosca's getting too excited, then he's just as willing to send him away.
Yeah, I mean, the more I look at this, it does feel like this whole situation is an experiment that he's observing and just seeing what the fallout is. Like, that's kind of how he looks at it. Not that he doesn't care about people's feelings. I want to be very careful how I phrase this. It's not like he's throwing people together and being like, damn the consequences. I think he at this point in the show is like, ooh, I may have tipped the scales a little too much than what I wanted, so I'm going to pull back a little bit. I find him eminently fascinating for a couple of different reasons. One, because he just kind of weaves in and out of the story and kind of throws Fosca and Giorgio together in interesting ways. But also he's an interesting character because of that one point in the story where he like puts the coin on the table and is like, one of these days, like, these soldiers are not going to talk about women or horses. Yeah. But it's not going to be today because it hasn't for like the last like few years type of thing. Meaning that he himself doesn't want to talk about those subjects. So he's really not interested in like the military, much like Giorgio isn't very much interested in like the military stuff. So his focus is more on the science and other stuff. And Giorgio is more focused on love.
But also not about sex, not about whores, right?
Correct, yes.
And so I think all of that is, for him, is not of interest.
This is how this song here then starts, as Giorgio is reading another letter that Clara has sent, and he says, Clara is singing this portion. Giorgio, I am writing to you, my angel, though not long since you've been gone, with a most unhappy heart, because in truth, as time goes on, I think of nothing else but you and us. Oh, my love, my sweet, you've changed. I've watched you change. You're not the man I thought I knew.
Giorgio, I am writing to you, my angel, though not long since you've been gone, with a most unhappy heart. Because in truth, as time goes on, I've thought of nothing else but you and us. Oh, my love, my sweet, you've changed. I've watched you change. You're not the man I thought I knew. At times...
Obviously, this is a callback to the trio, which is Giorgio's rejection of Fosca.
Right.
And so you know from the first notes that this is a rejection letter, even if the context of the show didn't already tell you that. I think it's interesting. Let's see.
There is what I always think is interesting is like, even though there is sort of rhymes going on here, it is not as calculated as that scene 13 that we discussed here before, where there is rhyme after rhyme after rhyme after rhyme that's going on, which we've kind of identified going through this season, me and my other guests, that normally within Passion, at least, the show Passion, rhyming usually means calculation, like they're being very deliberate with what they're trying to communicate, something they either rehearsed or trying to get something out of this person. And this one does seem, because it isn't really doing the same thing, feels like it is coming much more from the heart. Like she is kind of a bit devastated that she's going to be like, you know what? I don't know if this thing is going to last.
Yeah, I think the first one, I mean, scene 13. Yeah. The rhymey one. Yeah, she's trying to draw him in. This is her like last ditch effort to try to make it work. And so she's like trying to be super friendly. And this one, I think she's being more honest. You know, the kind of the artifice is gone. I think when she says, "You're not the man I thought I knew. You've changed. I've watched you change." It's not clear that she really knew him that well. I think
I think that's the real subtext of this is like, how much of this person did you actually know? Like, you didn't really talk about stuff when you were together. And
I think it's complicated because I do think Giorgio actually has changed. I think she's right. I think his experience with Fosca has changed his perspective in ways that we talked about earlier. I also think that she had a man in her head that wasn't quite Giorgio. Sure. She's really more just kind of seeing that.
She continues on here, though, and says, at times these past few days together, I would wonder whether you were here, really here with me. I thought, was I naive to believe we'd continue year by year? Is it over forever?
At times these past few days together, I would wonder whether you were here, really here with me. I thought, was I naive to believe we'd continue year by year? Is it over forever? When my son is old.
This still feels honest to me. This still feels emotionally honest. That he's back with her. I would wonder whether you were here, really here with me. I think she's correct. I think Clara's very perceptive. I think he's really still at the house with Fosca, you know, in his heart, you know. And he'll come back and see her, but he's kind of not there. And again, I this is the sort of thing where I've had experiences like this with this, you know, this person is with me, but like not really talking to me.
I feel, I don't know, sometimes I worry that I say like everyone has had this experience, and maybe that's not true, but I feel like that most people at least can understand that idea of this person is just not as into this relationship or as into me as I am with them. Now, again, I personally, the way that this show is constructed and the lyrics that Sondheim chooses for these characters to sing, I think that this was a doomed relationship anyways from the very beginning. Right. It's just, I think Fosca accelerated this ending to happen in perhaps a more unusual way than what it would have if it had just let itself run its course, sort of thing. But at the same point, I think her feelings still stand. It's like, this person has drifted away from me, and I kind of wanted to make this work during these, you know, afternoons we could spend with each other.
Can I set this up? This is a thought that I have.
Yeah.
It connects the show to Follies. This based on what you just said. This show in Follies, we get the young Ben and Phyllis and Sally and Buddy, and the old. In this show, we don't get to see old Clara and Giorgio. But I think what's sort of, I guess what you said that brought it out is that Fosca accelerated this relationship decaying. I think if Fosca hadn't been there, I think I could well imagine Clara and Giorgio's slightly toxic relationship continuing until they're well into middle age, and they're kind of bitter and hate each other and don't know how to get out of the relationship because it's all they know, like Ben and
Right.
Phyllis. And so I think
And middle age
Yeah.
at this time, of course, was
Yeah.
31 years old. So
So I think that this, to me, this Follies, I think, is the most depressing thing Sondheim has ever put on the stage, and I love it. I mean, I love that show, but I think this is a lot more optimistic, actually, a lot more hopeful, because you don't get this sense that like it's already, written in stone, and that people can change and people can realize these things.
Yeah, I think like the most tragic thing of Follies, from those like that, the two main couples that we're following through that show. Yeah, exactly. This, we're on the opposite side. Like, all of them kind of faked passion for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, maybe something was there at one time, but like it is atrophied to such a degree that I don't know if any of them have actually felt love, like true love, for like decades of their life. And I think that's like the tragedy of Follies to a certain extent, is like, yes, some of them have been successful, some of them have been able to persevere, but none of them have actually had like this actual drive of a human being. So I don't know, maybe some people will be like, but at least they have money. And I'm like, I guess, but
yeah, I think I'll have more to say on this later.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but
one of my favorite things then reoccurs here, which is they kind of go back to the song Happiness, both musical and actual, themes. Giorgio and Clara kind of going back and forth here. And actually, now I forget if he's actually reading the letter still, or this is just him monologuing. But regardless, Giorgio and Clara are going back and forth. So Giorgio starts, "Just another love story. No one is to blame. A temporary love story, but it needn't end the same. I thought that we had more. We had more. We had something more than any other love story. All that happiness. Is this what you call love? We had then. This logical and sensible, practical arrangement. We can have that happiness. This foregone conclusion, once again, you think that this is love?"
Just another love story.
No one is to blame.
A temporary love story.
But it needn't end the same.
I thought we had more.
We had more
We had something more than any other love story.
All that happiness.
Is this what you call love?
We had there.
This logical and sensible, practical
We can have
arrangement.
that happiness.
This foregone conclusion.
Once again.
You think that this is love? Love isn't so good.
This is basically a speed run through a bunch of statements that have happened already on the show.
right.
Because a lot of this has been said or sung before.
It is, yeah. So just another love story, that's from Happiness.
You think this is love, where we ended off there. Literally, there's a song called "You Think This Is Love," where
Right,
she
and that's
confronts
his other-
Fosca at. Yeah,
Right, that was Giorgio shouting at Fosca,
Yeah.
right? But interestingly, and this stuck out to me even the first time I listened, it's like only like 2 songs later, it's not that long after it, he's completely reversed.
yeah, that's right.
And I think that's why I hear that song where he's angry at Fosca, and I think he's already gone. And he just hasn't quite realized it.
No, sure.
It's like, I think you protest too much. But no, yeah. So he's turned that now in as his view on love has now shifted. He's interested in something that is larger, that is transcendent. So it's not just a temporary love story. That it's something more than any other love story. That it's not reducible to logical and sensible.
That's the thing, is like he's looking at this, the way that Clara is approaching this as a logical and sensible, a practical arrangement. It's like, that's not what love is. Love is like, you can't even define it. Like,
well, right, because
yeah,
Fosca's love is not logical because she's so sickly that there's no practical way for it to work out. She can't, at least as far as we know at this point in the show. The only comment on like Fosca has been from the doctor saying that she's not capable of being anyone's lover. I guess she like can't have sex, I guess, is what he's saying. But it's kind of not about, Fosca has no plan in mind for her life with Giorgio. Like, and it's purely just an emotion. It's purely a feeling, right? It's not contained within a life that she has planned out.
Right.
Whereas for Clara, she's like constantly trying to fit him in. Like you were saying earlier, she knows exactly when she can fit Giorgio in, and it kind of doesn't go beyond that. Yeah.
And such a an arc that has happened. I had to flip here to the beginning to remember what they say, but in the song "Happiness" that opens up the show, Clara is the one who says, "I thought it was." They're talking about, or sorry, Giorgio says, "I thought it was no more than a name for yearning," talking about love. And then Clara says, "I thought it was what kindness became," and he says, "Oh, I'm learning." And now it's like. It's like, no, it's not what kindness grows into. It's like something else that we're going to lead into what he thinks. But you can kind of see that she's much more orderly. It's like, well, this goes to this, which leads to this. And he's kind of been shown like, no, that's you can't schedule love. The name of my self-help book, by the way. You can't schedule love.
Might do well.
Yeah. So Giorgio goes on a little bit of a tirade here saying, love isn't so convenient. Love isn't something scheduled in advance. Not something guaranteed you need for fear it may pass you by. You have to take a chance. You can't just try it out. What's love unless it's unconditional? Love doesn't give a damn about tomorrow, and neither do I. And Clara goes, all that happiness, Giorgio, it was fine. Clara, in the past. Giorgio, I was yours, you were mine. And then Clara goes, that was not just happiness. Love was in that happiness. That's why it will last. And Giorgio, love is more. I want more.
You think that this is love? Love isn't so convenient. Love isn't something scheduled in advance, not something guaranteed you need for fear it may pass you by. You have to take a chance. You can't just try it out. What's love unless it's unconditional? Love doesn't give a damn about tomorrow, and neither do I.
All that happiness.
It was fine.
In the past.
I was yours, you were mine.
That was not just happiness. Love was in that happiness. That's why it will.
Love is more. I want more. I thought I knew what
I will say that like this particular part, and then also the next song, I do feel like it gets repetitive. Like the idea he's expressing is pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's rare, and I know Sondheim explicitly had to consciously do this, where people are saying simple things in a simple way. And it does seem a little, well, it's not convenient, it's not scheduled in advance. We already said it wasn't logical and sensible. Every time I hear this, it does feel a little bit like, okay, we get it.
Yeah, no,
I do have to be honest there, but
they had to hit that 90 minutes. They just really needed to hit the 90 minutes.
Stretch it.
Just stretch that out a bit. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing that you bring up here, though. Something that I feel at times in this show specifically, but in other Broadway shows more generally, me as an audience member who is a little bit ahead of the characters can sometimes feel like the show then is treading water, which is like, you've mentioned this now a few different times. Like, I fully understand. You as a character now have understood this point. Part of the Giorgio character is that I don't think he truly has figured out that he's in love with Fosca yet, so he has to keep saying this over and over again. Yeah,
maybe he's still. That's a good interpretation. He's still kind of working himself into that.
Yeah, that still doesn't invalidate what you just said though, because it's like, yeah, Giorgio, we get it. Like, take the next step. We're ready for you to take the next step.
Right. We're already in love with Fosca. Like, get on our level. Yeah. I do want to point out, this is where I want to bring back the Follies thing I mentioned earlier.
Sure.
Where's the line? For fear it may pass you by. I think for fear it may pass you by is an important line. I think something that is a theme across those two shows, I think you can also pull it out in Company and Merrily We Roll Along, but we can't talk about this stuff all day. So let's speaking of Follies. I think that people end up in relationships in Sondheim shows as in life because there's a mix of, I think there's genuine kind of attraction, physical attraction that doesn't go much deeper, but then they take it and they sort of justify it. They justify their own kind of self-interest in having a relationship with this person by sort of making up these kind of stories about how the relationship is something more than it is. And so I think you really, if you think about the Loveland sequence and when the young people are singing, "You're gonna love tomorrow," or / "Love will see us through," like they're doing that right in that song there. I think they're building up this sense of that their relationships are something more because they want to have a relationship. They want to be in a relationship because it gives them a sense of safety.
Mhm.
right? And so then where that ends, and we see this in Follies, is with Ben, where he says, like, I see love everywhere and I can't reach it.
Right,
He
right,
feels like
right.
he's never actually got there, because it was really almost a shell that he built. It's more of a protective thing based on his own self-interest. And so for fear it may pass you by, I feel like that's saying, like, they were in this relationship because they just wanted to be, they wanted someone to sleep with, and they wanted to be in a relationship. And that's very different, like I was saying, from Fosca, who her love, pulling in this line from the next song, her love is unconcerned with being returned, right? She
Yeah.
has no
Yeah,
particular thought.
I'm really liking this comparison with Follies, which I hadn't initially made, but I think
Mm-hmm.
you're totally right that left unchecked, you could see Giorgio growing up to being a Ben
Right.
in many ways, of being like disillusioned and then, closing himself off and hardening his outward shell, when he started off as being a far more, passionate and I don't know, good natured about the whole thing.
Right. And I think Sally, it seems like Sally's feeling about Ben is actually kind of Fosca-like. It seems like she has a genuine lifelong romantic obsession with Ben that doesn't go away when she hasn't seen him for 30 years. But she's not enough of a force of nature to make an impression on Ben. And Mary in Merrily We Roll Along is not enough of a force of nature to make an impression on Frank, right? These dynamics show up in a lot of places, but it's Fosca kind of uniquely is able to actually kind of cut through to something real,
Yeah, I mean, to make that comparison complete, like, Fosca would never sing Losing My Mind because she would think that'd be silly. She would literally just go to bed and say, this is what's going on. This is how I feel about you, sort of thing.
Right.
By the way, just as an aside, boy, do you not go to a Sondheim show to see non-toxic relationships.
No.
Very few that you could go into that are non-toxic.
Here's what not to do. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is how this kind of song ends. So they're both singing, I thought I knew what love was. And Clara says, I didn't know that love was a complication. Giorgio, I do not know that it's not a negotiation. Clara, we'll take it in our stride. What we had, you decide, wasn't bad. We could have everything. I want you more than anything. How sad. To wait is nothing. We're young and time is nothing. And then Giorgio finishes it off. That what we have is nothing. Nothing is what Clara's response. And then they both say nothing.
I want more. I thought I knew what love was.
I didn't know that love was a complication.
I do know that it's not a negotiation.
We'll take it in our stride.
What we had,
You decide.
wasn't bad.
We could have everything. I want you more than anything.
How sad
To wait is nothing. We're young and time is nothing.
that what we have is nothing.
Nothing. Nothing.
Ends off on a kind of a bummer note, but
Yeah. I think it's interesting.
That is what it is.
I did call this a rejection letter earlier. I think that's technically wrong, because Clara is not rejecting Giorgio in this. She is offering him this particular arrangement, which he calls a negotiation. I watched the Michael Cerveris version last night. I like how Michael Cerveris spat out negotiation. He was really mad. She's actually still, and even when she's saying nothing, she's saying time is nothing. She's still trying to make it work. At least theoretically, I think she probably knows it's not going to work out. I think this is one of those situations where you feel like the relationship is ending anyway, so you just make a kind of a big, ultimatum. But yeah, so they're saying the same word. They're saying the same word. Nothing. They're at cross purposes, right? He's saying, it's over, and she's saying there's nothing separating us.
Yeah, but yeah, I think the key two lines here is Clara singing, I didn't know that love was a complication, and Giorgio answering, I do know that it's not a negotiation. It's such an interesting admission from Clara to say, like, she didn't know that love was a complication. I think she really does think that love is just, like, happy all the time. Like, there's this idea that, like, well, that's what love is, which also confuses me to an extent. I really want to know more information about her husband for some reason. Like, I just want to know what that's all about. Like, obviously she doesn't care for him as much, or she would not be stepping outside the marriage. But anyways, that's
I
moving
wonder
down a
about
road that
that.
we don't need to investigate. But
Yeah, I think we just don't know. I think there's just no
Yeah.
way to know. We can only make fan fiction, but I would
Right.
read the fan fiction. I'm interested.
But it's interesting that she is the one that says that.
I
It's
didn't-
like, oh, I didn't know that love is a complication. I was like, really?
Yeah.
Because it seems like you're making this
Yeah.
complicated.
I don't know. I didn't know that love was a complication. The read I get from Clara, I think she's smarter than this. I think she does know. I think
Yeah.
I'm not fully sure why she's saying this. But like in the garden sequence when he says to feel a woman's touch, like
Right.
she knows immediately what's going on before anyone else. Like I think she
Yeah.
does.
You're
Love.
talking about this woman a lot. Like, what is going on here?
Right.
Yeah. Any last thoughts you have about this farewell letter?
I think it's a really, really cool piece of music here
Mm-hmm.
that takes, I think, primarily 3 songs. It takes the trio, Happiness, and
Is this what you
Is
call
This What
love?
You
I
Call
think.
Love?
Yeah.
And merges them together into this new thing, this
Mhm.
new piece, and the sort of differing, the contrast of this. Clara's still on the sweet happiness theme, and
Yeah.
Giorgio is on the bitter argument theme.
Yeah.
It works so well as a piece of music, and I think one thing I really like about this show is it does feel like a piece of classical music. It feels like, and I love long form classical music, and it feels like it does that, where it takes themes that it introduces to you, it
Sure.
puts them together in unexpected ways, and it creates these interesting emotional situations. So I love this show.
I totally agree. And I think this is why, not that like Sondheim and other composers don't use like a leitmotif in their shows, but in particular, this show, as I keep bringing up, Sondheim always recommends that this is the one show he thinks you should listen start to finish. He considers it one long song that he wrote with different like movements and stuff inside of it. And I think it is kind of true because it like brings up these like musical themes and doesn't really resolve them completely all the time until the very end, where we get it kind of all in that climax.
Well, I definitely have this experience where I want to, like I say, I'm in a situation where like, I feel awful. The only thing that can help is listening to the trio from Passion.
Sure, yeah.
But anytime I do that, I end up listening to the whole show because you just can't stop. It doesn't resolve at any point. You can't.
That's right.
It draws you in and you can't stop listening.
Oh, I forgot to ask you this. Is as far as like the version you like to listen to, is it the original Broadway cast or do you prefer one of the other recordings?
I prefer the original Broadway cast, and it actually was not the first. The first one I listened to was the Judy Kuhn version. And
With all the book
I do like
scenes
that.
included.
I'm not saying I dislike that, but when I heard the original cast, it really clicked. And Donna Murphy as Fosca, like you really hear. And actually, I really like is it Jerry Shea? I don't know how to say
Jerry Shea, yeah.
Jerry Shea. I really like his voice. He has the right like kind of 19th century voice. He sounds like he's a baritone from a this time in Italy. Like I believe it,
Yeah, for sure.
So I think it is the original cast for me. I love that. I love that. I often that's the case where I just don't need anything beyond the original cast for the most part.
I know that you prepared like a whole page of notes here. Anything that we want to pull from there that we didn't discuss? It's like, oh, we need to discuss this one last thing.
I think I managed to slip a lot of this in. Oh, okay. Here's my final question for you. I kind of voiced this earlier. I think that Giorgio, it's really in the "Is This What You Call Love," where the fact that he is in love with Fosca becomes known to the audience, if not to him, because he, up until that point, his relationship to Fosca, he's always just been extremely cold and polite. Like in I Read, he's just like, yes. Like if you listen to just what he says. And then in his version of this same song, I am writing to you, Signora, with a most unhappy heart. Like it is very cold and formal. That's the moment where he loses it and he actually shows her passion, right? She is able to bring emotion out of him. To me, I look at that scene and I'm like, okay, well that's it. It's too late. But what's your opinion? When do you think he's
so I could see that reading and I understand that reading. I actually think it's right before this letter. If I was to like make like a grand statement or a grand argument, I think it's right before this. I think that the scene that you're discussing when he like has that blowout and he like yells yells at Fosca, I think it's him literally being angry, not really knowing why he's angry.
Right.
And this is upon reading Clara's letter, like him going and meeting her and be like, you know what, I'm going to go back home. I don't want to spend my 40 days here. This is him fully realizing like, oh, I get it. Now I know why I'm butting up against this. It's because Clara's not showing me love. Fosca's the one who's showing me love, and I'm kind of receptive to it.
Well, right. That's when he gets it. That's when he knows it. But he's already at that point. He's already foregone his sick leave, right? So I kind of imagine that subconsciously he's kind of worked it out more than, and he just needs to put the pieces together. Add him up, Bobby. Add him up.
Well, yeah. I think what it is his is this what you call love? Well, maybe, I think maybe I'm agreeing with you.
Maybe
disagreeing
loving
with
you.
Which is like, it's like, I think that's when the audience can tip over and be like, oh, wait a second, like you are protesting a bit too much here. But he doesn't realize it until like a scene later.
Right.
That's when he realizes what's going on.
Because in loving you, that's when he all this time, I think he's thought that Fosca is like got some kind of master plan to try to make him love her. But when he realizes that it's really not about that for her, she's just doing the only thing she knows. I think that probably is what is the causes him to realize eventually. Yeah, I
would love to see another revival of this show. I think it's ripe to be brought back onto the stage in kind of a more intimate setting. So if I knew the New York theaters more than I did, I would tell you which one I think it should go into, but I don't. So it's whatever the small one is.
Right.
Also, I would love for there to be a film, like an actual film version of this, which I realize 20 people would go and see. I would be one of them. But I think you could make this fairly cheaply. I'm putting that in quotes. Fairly
cheaply.
Not a
special effects needed for...
I don't think so. Just
you
go
don't
on
have to
vacation.
film people over 25 years or whatever.
Exactly. Right.
Some other play we don't have to name.
It's not going to make wicked money. Let's put it that way.
Probably not. This play is probably never going to be quite the cultural sensation of Wicked. I will say that.
But you just throw Defying Gravity halfway through this. No one's going to know this. Charlotte, thank you so much for coming back here to the show and taking some time out of your day. The question I have been asking everyone is a wrap-up question. Of course, this show is called Passion, kind of in like that romantic sense, but you can take this question in any way you want. Currently, what are you the most passionate about?
Yeah, well, I do love music. I do love playing my piano. But I think I have to say that what I'm most passionate about right now is that I've been volunteering at a pig rescue. So it's called the Central Texas Pig Rescue. And I go there and you go around and feed the pigs and you pet the pigs, you get to know the pigs. And I think I'm passionate about pigs. I think pigs are really sweet, intelligent animals. And I really like getting to know them.
So I need to know so much more information. Where are these pigs being rescued from?
Yeah, they're being rescued from breeders. So breeders will breed the pigs and they'll try to starve them. The goal is to make them small and emaciated and then tell people that they're pot-bellied pigs, like which doesn't pigs. Actually exist. There's no such thing as a teacup pig, right? But they'll tell people that like this pig is going to be small all its life, so people will buy it as a pet for a lot of money. And then eventually it'll get too big for the home.
Exactly. Yeah. Pigs get big. Yeah.
But I think this has happened quite a few times, and sometimes the breeders have like large numbers of pigs that are being kept in not very humane conditions. And I think our rescue has about 200 from mostly from that kind of situation. Also, sometimes from medical testing or.
Oh wow! Okay.
I think after medical testing, usually pigs are killed, or the subjects of medical tests are killed. But a couple of our residents are from that.
That's fascinating. So they are just there to be kept until they like naturally pass away, or is there
just
like
living out happy lives? It's like a retirement community.
Yeah.
They have a lot of special accommodations. You have to feed them their meds. To feed them meds, you put it in something, like you put in a marshmallow, put little into and then you give them it. And some of them will eat it out of your hand. Some of them are too shy, and you have to like drop it in front of them and then stand back and try to make sure the other pigs don't get it. It's just so sweet and fun. So
that's crazy.
I really love doing it.
That's amazing. There is no way you would have ever known this. So I grew up on a farm, so we raised cows, but we also raised pigs as well. So I am intimately familiar with raising pigs. And what I always tell people, this is going to sound very mean, I realize, because yes, these were animals that were also being raised to provide meat for people. But just as like raising animals, I always say cows are incredibly dumb. They're cute and lovable, and I love them, but they're so dumb. Like they'll just walk into walls and they're just dumb. But pigs are like incredibly smart, smart.
You can see
will like really consider things. Will learn things. I always tell the story about them. We had electric fence is how we mostly did things, but they would know when you turned it off. So they figured out when we turned it off to come in to feed them, and then they would try to make their grand escape. So we had to come up with other plans on how to feed them.
Yeah, and they're complex social dynamics. They like make friends, and then sometimes their friendships break up, and they have to make new friends.
Yeah. Well, pigs, everyone.
Yeah.
Now I want to write a show about pigs. I think that I guess Animal Farm the musical is right there. I guess people could do, but Charlotte, if people wanted to. I know the answer to this, by the way, but I'm going to ask it to you anyways. Yeah. Is there a way to follow you online?
Yeah, not really. But so here's what I'll say. First of all, you could look up the Central Texas Pig Rescue. A lot of good stuff. We have a website. I learned about that. But also, you could email me charlottelemay1@icloud.com. And like if you're, I'll just say like if you're in the like Austin or like Central Texas area, you should email me and we should like meet up because New York people shouldn't have all the fun. So yeah, that's your task if you're hearing this and you live there.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Kyle.
So long, farewell, I'll read it saying goodbye. I leave and heave a sigh and say goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow me at the Kyle Marshall on Instagram. This is an independent production, and you can support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Putting It Together is available on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about No One Has Ever Loved Me, currently the title of my personal subreddit. As always, a big thank you to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.